Sit back, breathe in the cold, whispering air. Let the sound of the world settle around you like a blanket of snow. There is a road that winds through high pines and frozen rivers, a road that knows every footfall, every falter. It is old. It is patient. Tonight, it carries you gently toward the heart of a place where mountains keep their own counsel, and the stars hold grudges older than memory. Skyrim is a slow thing. It moves like glacier and like wind, with a patience that outlasts the ambitions of men. Picture it in the dim hour between waking and sleep. The world softened, edges blurred by frost and by dream. Snow falls in quiet sheets. It pools along the eaves of homes and gathers in the hollows of abandoned cairns. The aurora paints the long dark in green and violet ribbons, lazy and deliberate, as if the sky itself has learned to breathe and sigh. Underneath that cold, under the hush of the pines, there are stories folded into the land like veins in old bone. Tonight you will follow one story, but you will feel the others at the edges of your hearing. The soft murmur of tavern laughter carried on the wind, the far-off clang of smiths tending to lives made of iron, the faint, lonelier call of a raven sealing a watch. There is a hearth in a small village, the kind of place where the roofs sag with age and the dogs know the boots of every traveler who passes through. The hearth breathes warmth into the bones of the night, and from that warmth, tales rise like steam. An old woman with hands like maps tells them by the fire. A child clutches a wooden sword and lets his eyes grow large. But tonight the story is not of cackling hearthlight or of mead and merriment. Tonight the story is of a voice that does not belong to any one throat. Tonight the story is of the Dragonborn. Say the name softly to yourself. It does not demand shouting. Dragonborn. Dava, one word warm against the tongue, an old sound that tastes like stone. There are many ways to say who the Dragonborn is. Some call them a hero, some a weapon, others a curiosity, and a few, whispering places, call them a burden. The truth is a line you cannot trace with your finger. It bends under the weight of history. For now, think of them as a person whose heart keeps two beats, one that is human and slow, one that is older and vast, humming like a storm. You walk with them through the outskirts of town, muffled by layered cloth and leather. Their breath draws white clouds against the dark. The sound of the snow underfoot is crisp, a small metronome that steadies the mind. Their hands, calloused and sure, rest on the familiar curve of a sword. The weapon is not the point. It is a companion, polished with routine, carrying the smell of oil and old sweat. What matters is the voice in their throat, a leaden thing that rises sometimes in sleep and sometimes in sudden, startling clarity. It is not always a sound people hear. It is more like a pressure, a memory of thunder behind the ribs. When it speaks, the air itself answers. They come from somewhere like everyone else, from a family with names that trace back like roots into the soil. They have laughing ghosts, brothers who have left and not returned, mothers who pressed bread into hands before dawn. There is tenderness in their past, a hand on their cheek, a crooked smile, the way the world smelled after rain. Keep that tenderness in your mind. Hold it close. It is the thread that will tug at everything that happens next. For that thread is what makes the changes dreadful, the presence of something old that asks to be noticed, and that notices because it is hungry for recognition. High above, the throat of the world is a slow, monumental thing. From a distance, it is the color of gunmetal. Up close, it is a canyon of ice and wind. The graybeards reside on its flank, shaded in stone, chanting in exhalations that make the wind themselves seem to listen. They are a choir of ages, robes like fog, faces carved by prayer and omission, voices shaped into hibernation. They speak in silence sometimes, but their silence is not empty. It is full of old teachings and stone-worn warnings. They will teach the Dragonborn to shape the voice into something more than a tremor. They will press into the hollow places, into the marrow, and draw out sound like maps from a pocket. They will name the dragon roar, the breath words, the ancient syllables that can move the very bones of the world. But even the graybeards have shadows in their chant. They live in a place where sound becomes a landscape. The more you listen, the more the background shifts. In the hush between syllables, where breath is held and the mountain exhales, there are echoes that do not belong to man or mountain. Sometimes the wind is not wind at all, but the rustle of claws through stone, or the broken teeth of something that remembers being a god. The graybeards know. Their eyes are patient, their fingers are slow. They will not frighten you. They will instruct you in the ways of the old words. But there is a secret their teaching cannot remove. The voice in the Dragonborn is not only a tool, it is a hinge. There are places in Skyrim where the earth forgot to be kind. Bleak Falls Barrow is one of them, a place with a mouth of shadow and teeth of stone. When you stand at its entrance, it feels as though the world were leaning forward to listen. The sarcophagi inside smell of dry dust and of old, stubborn cold. Bones rest in patterns that speak of ritual and hunger. Draugr keep their vigils there, their skin papery and thin as leaves. They do not sleep as you do. They are part specter, part sleepwalker. They move when attention shifts, when a footstep breaks pattern, when the throbbing of an old voice calls back to them by name. At first, the Draugr are simply memories of war, stiffened corpses, still in the poses of their last defiance. But look closer, and you will notice the wrongness. A twitch that suggests a reflex of life, a curl of a dead mouth that remembers smiling. There will be sounds you do not expect, breathing that matches the cadence of an ancient chant, scraping as of armor being refastened. These small betrayals are the first threads of unease. We will walk into those places later. For now, stay with the quiet. Stay with the crackle of the hearth, the low murmur of conversation, the steady beat of the world. There are people who will meet you. There is a blacksmith with hands like anvils, who will look at the Dragonborn and see potential rather than prophecy. There is an innkeep who polishes mugs with the same rag over and over, and tells jokes that do not vary with the seasons. There is a child who places a pressed flower into the Dragonborn's hands, and insists that heroes mustn't forget to feel. Keep them in your sight. These tempered, human chords are what anchor the tale. They are what will fray, and the unwinding will be what makes the nights that follow so merciless. The Dragonborn sleeps sometimes with the weight of the tongue pressed behind the teeth, a sound like a throat remembering itself. In those hours, the dreams crowd in soft at first, like sheep, gentle, harmless. You might picture dragons as they appear in stories, vast things of smoke and flame with eyes like embers. In dream they are softer, voices folded into clouds, slumbering shapes that rock like islands on a slow sea. The first dreams are not frightening. They are full of old names and older songs. But if the wind changes, if there is a tremor under the soles of your feet, the dreams twist subtly. A dragon snuffles the corner of a mountain like a dog looking for a buried bone. A name is repeated again and again until the repetition becomes a drumbeat and then a pulse. There is a texture to this world, a thing you can almost touch. It is the feel of cold metal against skin. It is the rasp of old parchment. It is the metallic tang of a city's breath when forges are lit at night. It is the smell of pine and the sourness of cider, the salt of sweat and the sharper perfume of fear. Let your senses sink into these things. Notice the way the dragon's shadow cools the sun, how light passes through a sky full of wings and comes out thin and different. Notice how the bone white of a dragon's skull catches moonlight and scatters it in 100 tiny reflections like frost. These are the small luxuries of the land, the things that feel like safety and that become, eventually, the means by which danger announces itself. Sometimes you will hear the crackle of a vox signal that is not quite a voice, not quite a memory. It could be the creak of an old ship. It could be the subtle vibration of a feather falling from a raven's wing. In the chest of the Dragonborn, there is a quiet war between old tenderness and a new compulsion. One part reaches for warm bread in the hands of friends. Another part listens to the old syllables and answers them from the very marrow. The tension is like two strings plucked at once. They sing in harmony for a moment, and then one begins to unravel. People will tell you, in different ways, that power costs. The farmer will say it in an aside at the market. A sharp blade takes more than it gives. And the innkeep will say it with a sigh when the fire guttered last winter. There is a ledger the world keeps, and often it is balanced in ways that are cruel and small. The Dragonborn is taught in 1,000 little ways about sacrifice. The time spent training when another might sleep. The old scar that was earned to keep someone else alive. The quiet forgiveness of those who must leave. Those lessons are practical, blunt, human. But there is another balance the world will demand. A tally that lives beyond coin and favor. It is not counted in gold. It is counted in songs and names, in the resonance of a shout when it bends the world like the bell of a monastery. Under the veneer of these village days, there runs a current with a deeper mind. Some of the old stones speak in a tongue that spiders understand, a language of pressure and weather, of weight and thaw. The runes are not always meant to be read by eyes. They are experienced with the throat, when the Dragonborn places their lips to them, sometimes in the solitude of an empty field, sometimes under the watchful patience of a graybeard. A vibration will crawl up the spine like a slow, polite animal. This sensation sells itself as wonder. It promises meaning and an end to doubt. It is also an invitation. Sometimes invitations are polite. Sometimes they are not. You might begin to notice little things, threads of ink on an old map that point not to treasure but to markers of memory. The way a name carved into a door appears older than the wood it is carved upon. Notice the way the people around you shiver when a certain night song rolls out from high Hrothgar, like the mountain itself is clearing its throat. The graybeards will tell you that the thumb is not a weapon so much as a language. They will teach the Dragonborn to speak it with care, to think in its cadence. But languages are greedy. They claim syntax and then meaning, and then, if you are not careful, they will claim the thinker. This is the quiet at the start. It is the lodestone to which the rest of the night will return, the place of small comforts and human warmth. But notice, as you drift, the tremor beneath the calm. A raven perches on an old sign and tilts its head in a way a bird should not. A child hums a lullaby that winds through half a dozen other, stranger words before sinking back into normality. There is an undercurrent of repetition that should feel like rhyme but which tastes faintly of rust. These are the hints of a night that will not let go. We will go deeper soon. We will trail the Dragonborn into cold crypts, into the breathing mouths of ruins, and up along ice-rimmed ridges where the wind speaks in old voices. For now, hold the image of that hearth and the sound of the snow underfoot. Hold the feel of the graybeard's silence like a hand over your heart. Remember the tenderness from which the Dragonborn came. Keep that strand in your fingers. It will be the measure of what is lost, and what is taken in ways both grand and heartbreakingly small. One more small thing before we let sleep find you. Listen for a sound barely louder than the beating of your own blood. It is the sound of a name being said, softly, as if in a different room. It is the ink smell of a page turned by fingers that tremble not from cold but from recognition. It is the first sign that the story has teeth. Keep it in your ear like a secret. The mountain will not hurry. The road will not forget. Tonight in the hearth's glow, the Dragonborn draws a breath, and somewhere far above the pines, a voice answers, not with thunder but with patience. It is a low acknowledgement, like a bell heard through a curtain. You do not need to be afraid of it yet. Fear is a lamp that we will light later and then watch it burn. For now, you are safe near the fire. You are warm. You are listened to. You are held. And beneath that holding, something waits, old, patient, and not quite content with being only a story. Soon you will hear it breathe. Soon the evening will shift and the voice will rise. Keep your fingers curled on the thread of tenderness. Hold the name of Dragonborn soft against the palate of your mind. Let the world settle and the snow hush your breath. Sleep gently now, and in your half-sleep, let the mountain and the wind and the old words press close. The tale has only begun. There is a kind of hunger that does not announce itself with sharp teeth. It comes like a winter fog, a subtle seep that cools the edge of flesh and settles into the hollows. You cannot point to it and say, there it eats. Instead, you notice over time that things taste slightly different, bread less sweet, laughter slightly thin, the way a name slides off the tongue like stone. This is the hunger at the center of what it means to be Dragonborn. It is not a single thing but a gathering of things, old obligations, older voices, and the yawning appetite of a power that insists it be recognized. The Dragonborn walks through a world made of obligations. Some are clearly named, oaths sworn at ale-splattered tables, favors traded for shelter, contracts struck with a blade's edge. Those are human debts. They sit in the marrow and can be repaid by hands and time. Another set of demands is quieter and older. They arrive in the voice that wakens at an odd hour, in the taste of iron that hangs on breath after a shout, in the calloused place at the back of the throat that suddenly knows a word it never learned in any school. These are the debts of lineage and of fate. They are ledgered in a language older than coin, and they answer only to the resonant urging that lives beneath the ribs. To speak of the nature of the Dragonborn properly, you must accept two truths at once. The first is simple and tender. The Dragonborn is human. They bruise and stop bleeding. They hunger and sleep. They feel the sting of a burned palm and the softness of an honest smile. They have memory and home and small cruelties that inch them, sometimes, toward repentance. They are vulnerable in the ways ordinary people are vulnerable. A child's small hands in theirs, the ache after a long day, the dream of a quiet hearth. Hold that, because without it the next truths do not wound, they simply leer. The second truth is the ache. They are also a conduit. Within their chest nests something that predates naming. The dragon soul is not an object to be wielded so much as a presence that learns to use a mouth and hands. When it wakes, it will pull at the edges of thought. It does not think in sentences. It thinks in pressure and song. It remembers mountain-scented storms and the terrible courtesy of teeth. When the Dragonborn breathes the old words, that presence answers, and the two, human and more than human, match pitches like chords tightening on a lyre. For a while it can be thrilling, a reality widened, a body made capable of thunder. But there is a gravity to such doubling. The longer the two hearts beat together, the more their rhythms borrow from each other until one claims the metronome. Factions in Skyrim are not mere alliances of convenience. They are, more often than not, mirrors. Each reflects back to the Dragonborn a slice of what is possible and what will be required to seek it. A guild offers practice, a monastery discipline, a cult absolution and a different kind of ownership. The Greybeards are less a faction and more a crust of stone laid against the torrent of noise. They do not crave power. They cultivate a particular kind of listening. Their austerity is a prayer and a method. When the Dragonborn comes to them, as all inescapable destinies should, they place the voice in the palm of the mountain and teach a kind of patience. They are experts in the labor of saying what must be said and not saying what ought not be breathed. In their presence, words are chisels, used to carve and protect, not to display. Yet even silence is not innocent. The Greybeard's silence is full of histories kept for reasons better left unknown. You may picture them as kindly tutors, bearded men in fog-stained robes cupping the Dragonborn's ears and guiding a shout into a shape. This is true, but within the long tradition that they safeguard, there are aspects that feel less like protection and more like preparation for loss. They teach the Dragonborn to use the voice to bend weather and stone, but the craft itself comes with a cost measured in small but inexorable diminishments. For each time they help the Dragonborn call something into being, lift a gate, stop a storm, there is a piece taken that can no longer be wholly human. The shouts leave marks that are not always visible, a thinning of laughter, a sliver missing from empathy, a reflex that replaces thought. In the quiet corners behind their chant, the Greybeards hold a ledger, what the voice may do and what it will quietly ask in return. Across the way are the magisters of the College of Winterhold, who watch the Dragonborn with a different eye. Knowledge for them is an instrument, and magic is a precise tool with shimmering, teachable edges. The college offers learning, spells that curve light, wards that hold a door, texts that explain the brittle skeleton of reality. To some, it may appear that learning magic could be an antidote to the gnawing hunger. Knowledge might be a surgeon's knife that separates the dragon soul from the man. In practice, it is rarely so clean. Magic is itself a seduction. The more you peer into the mechanism of reality, the more you begin to feel authorized to rearrange it. For a dragonborn already dangling between categories, some arcane practices act like lenses. Suddenly, choices and consequences can be viewed, then rationalized away. Schemes appear where none existed. What is more, magic often teaches economies. Energy in, effect out. It encourages calculation where there was once tenderness. A spell that makes a wound vanish may promise mercy. The subtle cost might be the way the dragonborn stops remembering the exact face of the one they healed. Again, trade-offs, measured not in gold but in inches of soul. Other factions ask for different offerings. The companions teach metal and bone to perform as shields of honor. They offer blunt, animal camaraderie. To them, the dragonborn is a champion whose feats are proof and whose oath is payment. Here the cost is simpler but still surgical. The more battles you fight, the more you learn to divide the mind away from the mess of feeling. Kill enough to save lives, and you shelve pieces of sorrow in a chest that becomes harder to open. The Dark Brotherhood, on the other hand, is a cult that offers perfection in the erasure of choice. It trades anonymity and purpose for a steady diet of moral denials. To the Brotherhood, the Dragonborn may be a useful blade, accurate, efficient, maybe even a legend. But the Brotherhood's way strips the surface of kindness with a steady, practiced hand. An assassination practiced, a face learned, a life extinguished. It is not merely brutality, it is the removal of the possibility of return. Then there are the Thalmor, like slim veils of politics wrapped around ideology. They are not interested in fostering the Dragonborn's voice. They wish to control the world in ways that make such voices inconvenient. They represent a bureaucracy of principles written to exclude complication. For a Dragonborn, contact with such a faction is a test of whether one will yield to being drawn into systems of justification and governance. Systems that can translate moral perplexity into doctrine. The Thalmor's brand of order asks for compromise of a different kind, the surrender of nuance and the adoption of a tidy, cruel logic. Daedric cults present perhaps the most poisonous bargains. The Daedra do not bargain in tiny forfeitures. They demand wholehearted offerings, the sort of devotion that anchors a soul like a ship to a reef. A Daedric prince will often speak in a language the Dragonborn understands as comfort, promises of power, of being set apart, of having a purpose that slices through the fog of indecision. In return, the prince will ask for a self that is consumable, a memory, a limb of kindness, a promise to commit an atrocity. Their worship is intoxicating because it provides meaning beyond doubt. But meaning purchased at the cost of autonomy is a gilded cage. The Dragonborn who takes such gifts will feel a steady cold where warmth once sat. The voice becomes sharper, more insistent, shaped not by human longing but by the aesthetic of a cosmic patron. Outside of organized factions are the dragons themselves, less a group than a presence that hangs over the world like a weather pattern. Dragons are not aligned in political ways. They carry a scale of history that human institutions cannot measure. They remember summers when the sea was different and winters when the mountains were young. Dragons see the Dragonborn as kin or as a source of fuel, depending on whim and appetite. They are complex creatures, capable of affection as well as annihilation, capable of teaching the thumb and of tearing out the throat that utters it. The dragon soul within the Dragonborn is a portion of this older order. When dragons speak to the Dragonborn, it is not often with gentleness. They are blunt, instructive, and sometimes cruelly useful. A dragon can whisper a shard of truth, and that shard will change how the Dragonborn understands their position in the world. Sometimes the dragon's word is a compass, pointing, perhaps, toward a destiny. Often it is a magnet that tugs at something else entirely, something that the Dragonborn will not fully recognize until they feel its weight in the marrow. Underpinning all of these external structures is something more insidious and intimate, the way power rewires desire. The first time the Dragonborn summons a shout to break a timber gate, there is a rush like the first quickness of a dawn. It feels miraculous, efficacious, and necessary. The second, the third, the thousandth time, that rush begins to recalibrate priorities. Where once compassion might have been the default reaction to a child's cry, the quick calculation of what will this power afford me if I use it becomes a new reflex. This is not to say the Dragonborn is cruel by nature. Rather, the availability of an easy, profound solution pushes the mind to prefer it. If you have a voice that can move stones, the temptation to use it to silence grief rather than sit with it is enormous. In the quiet arithmetic of survival, the voice becomes a solvent for trouble. But solvents also dissolve the edges of what makes someone whole. The physical body responds in its own vocabulary. The act of shouting is not without cost. Breath is surrendered differently. The wind seems to braid a small heat into the lungs that does not always leave. After prolonged use, the Dragonborn may notice calluses in the throat, a rasp that is less voice and more weathered timber. Time brings small transformations. A throat that quickens with the first syllable, eyelids that narrow in the moment before the shout, a posture that becomes ready for a roar. Friends may note a slight distancing, a patience leached out by habit. You can measure it in ordinary ways too. Missed birthdays, a hand that lingers less often to stroke a cheek, a laugh that is quicker to curtail. Each item is small, but together they create a filamentous web that circumscribes the soul. There is an inner geography to all of this, an anatomy of the divided self. Imagine for a moment a house with two rooms joined by a narrow hallway. In one room live memories of childhood, warmth, the smell of bread. In the other lives a long, cold flame that remembers the roar of a mountain. At first, the hallway is wide and easy to cross. The Dragonborn moves between rooms without strain, fetching both tenderness and thunder depending on need. Over time, however, the doorway narrows. The flame begins to demand more air. The warmth room, if not tended, becomes damp and dim. It takes deliberate acts, placing bread on a table, touching a friend's shoulder, pausing to notice a sunset, to keep the warmth from receding. Neglect this and the cold will claim corners. The voice inside, like a slow animal, will creep into the empty furniture and sleep there. That is the real horror that grows. Not immediate annihilation, but a gradual redecoration of the self in tones that favor distance. But the Dragonborn is not helpless. Knowledge and self-examination are not absent from their arsenal. They learn, if they are careful, to measure the cost of a shout with the precision of a cobbler measuring a foot. They can decide to let the shout go unused, to keep a valley from being leveled in exchange for a life still warm to the touch. They can bind themselves with vows, small human ropes that loop around the heart and make it hard to hand over the night to a roaring appetite. The companion's oaths, the college's discipline, the graybeard's controlled cadences, these are all ways to construct scaffolding for the soul. The problem is that scaffolding can be dismantled easily by circumstance. In a moment of terror, habit will recommend the loudest solution. It is so much easier to call thunder than to sit with fear. There are also quieter, stranger consequences. The Dragonborn occasionally finds echoes in strangers' eyes, a recognition that is more than tribute and less than ownership. People sometimes greet them not as a person but as a legend come down the road. This mythic gaze is a kind of pressure. It creates expectations the Dragonborn did not ask for, to save, to choose, to be the center of a turning wheel. When legend looks like love, it is tempting to feed it. Praise becomes a warmth all its own, and praise is addictive. The more the world lauds the Dragonborn, the more easily they stand apart, untouchable in small ways. This isolation becomes another toll, social. and then internal. One day the Dragonborn looks up and realizes they have grown used to being observed, and the eyes of others begin to define the contours of their choices. Layer on top of this the murk of prophecy. Prophecies are strange things, written originally as warnings, later cited as proof, and always misread as plan. Old stones carved with runes speak of a voice that would shape time. Different factions read those runes in ways that suit their appetites. The Greybeards hear a call toward harmony. The Thalmor see a threat to be neutralized. Cults see a coronation. The Dragonborn, stuck at the center of these translations, must confront the fact of being an object of other people's narratives. The more people interpret your life, the more your life takes on the gravity of expectation. You wake to find your choices bracketed by other people's meanings. And yet there is tenderness left. The Dragonborn can, and often does, clutch to it with fierce diligence. A hand on a child's shoulder, an embrace that returns like spring, the ritual of cleaning a weapon with careful motions. These are rituals that anchor. When the dragon soul presses too hard, when the two hearts tug in different directions, it is these human acts that draw the Dragonborn back. They become small resistances, quiet and stubborn. When a friend laughs at a bad joke, when a companion insists on sharing last night's bread, those moments are small seals that ward off the general attrition. The body remembers not only how to shout, but how to soften. That memory is a kind of salvation. Still, the deeper lesson is inevitable. Power transforms. It does not necessarily corrupt in a sudden, theatrical way. Rather, it alters, slowly and mercilessly, the topology of desire, attentiveness, and responsibility. The Dragonborn must live with multiplicity, a heart that wants to save, and a presence that wants to be recognized, a throat that can move mountains, and a thumb that knows the shape of warmth. How they navigate this architecture determines whether they will be a bridge or a ruin. There are times when the Dragonborn will taste the chiaroscuro of both truths at once. In the glow after a battle, when embers hang in the air like distant little suns, they may stand and hear their own name said in a voice that is not theirs and feel kinship and sorrow simultaneously. They may cradle a wounded foe and find that the dragon soul is not always an unfeeling god. It too recoils at needless cruelty at certain times, and some dragons, unaccountably, value an honest hand pressed against an aching scalp. The world is not uniform in its demands of cruelty. There are eddies of gentleness even in the torrent. Yet do not underestimate the slow, patient thing that watches for neglect. A life given to astonishment can make room for a monstrous companion. It is waiting in the little absences you do not notice. A friend forgotten in the loudness of fame. A promise left undone because tasks felt more urgent. The Dragonborn's nature is not a problem to be solved once, but a landscape to be traversed daily. Each morning offers a choice: to use the voice in service to human ties, or to let the voice enlarge until the human ties are merely decorations. The factions around the Dragonborn are tools and tests and temptations. They will define possibilities and carve pathways through the snow. Some will offer discipline, others will smile and buy loyalty with sweet promises, some will strip choice away altogether. The crucial fact is that all of them will ask for payment of some sort. Not always what you expect, and rarely what you can fully afford. Listen now, softly, to the way your body answers this story. Do you feel the small tightness behind the ribs when the word power appears? That is an honest thing. Let it be a reminder rather than a panic. The Dragonborn's nature is not pure doom. It is complexity rendered in muscle and song. The danger comes from forgetting that you are more than any single function. Remember the warmth, the bread, the child's pressed flour. Remember the graybeard's slow patience and the college's precise curiosity. Remember the companion's solidarity and how the dark brotherhood's cold efficiency reads like a lesson in moral anesthesia. Remember dragons as teachers and as predators. We will return to the specific ways these tensions twist into horror. For now, accept the texture. Power as an atrial thing, factions as mirrors that teach, and the Dragonborn as both human anchor and aerodynamic conduit. The work of what comes next will be to show how the slow erosion of tenderness makes room for something else, something vast, patient, and hungry. Keep that in your hand, a small, warm thing you refuse to put down. It will be the measure of loss when loss begins to take shape. And when it does, you will need the memory of it like a lantern in a corridor. Hold it now before the wind rises and the shout goes out into the night. Listen closely. Breathe slowly. Let the cold air sit in the hollows at the base of your lungs and then let it go. We begin at the same measured pace as before, soft, patient, as if telling a child across a lap, because terror grows better from comfort than from a sudden plunge. The first part of the night is gentle. The path is familiar, footsteps on packed snow, the creak of leather, a candle whose flame is stubborn, refusing to wink out despite drafts. These are small assurances. Keep them in your awareness as an anchor. They make the later unraveling fuller, more personal, more exact. There are rumors that arrive in winter like seeds. Fine and sharp, they lodge in the throat and germinate unseen. The Dragonborn first notices the rumors as a texture in conversation, not as explicit speech. An innkeeper pauses mid-sentence when the name is mentioned, and the way his fingers curl around a wooden mug feels like something pulling inward. A child looks over a shoulder and tilts her head as if listening to a sound only she can hear. A dog refuses to approach the Dragonborn until they have passed, tail tucked, eyes too bright. These are small things. If you attend only to their content, they will betray nothing. But if you attend to the way the world subtly rearranges itself, someone moving a piece of furniture, then moving it back, a candle guttering though the air is still, you will feel the first threads of wrongness. Dreams change before the mind realizes they have. In the beginning, the Dragonborn's dreams are like soft books opened at bedtime, fables told in slow pages. In them, dragons are distant and warm as winter hearths, their massive breaths like being wrapped in a cloak. They sing old poems about stone and sky. They teach the Dragonborn syllables like lullabies. The first misstep is that the lullabies begin to dwell on repetition. A dragon in a dream hums a single phrase for too long, and hearers sense not comfort but the steadying of a drumbeat. Repetition is the quiet work of ritual, and rituals have purposes that go beyond soothing. At first, the wrongness arrives as sound, a whisper in the rafters of an inn that is not caught by any head turn. The whisper is neither the cadence of a living voice nor the brittle crackle of old timber. It is in a register between thinking and hearing, like an afterimage that keeps moving if you look directly at it. Sometimes it will arrive as the particular rustle of vellum, old, flaking paper, although no one is turning pages. The hair at the nape of the Dragonborn's neck tightens as if someone has spoken behind them, and the syllables were not meant for human ears. These murmurs will come and go, and when they do, the Dragonborn's name flickers in them, soft as embers, as if being tested for temperature. Auditory anomalies intensify by degree. A door slams 3 houses down, and the sound is carried like a bell through the valley. But the echo that returns is not weather-shaped. It seems to answer with a human cadence, arranging itself into parts of phrases that the Dragonborn half recognizes. Voices in market squares pause mid-haggling, as if caught by a suggestion they cannot identify. A smith's hammering falls out of rhythm and then resumes, but the renewed beat is subtly different, more like a counting of something that does not align with hours. Animals are quick to register. Ravens will sit in a circle and watch, not cawing, as if engaged in private deliberation. Horses will shiver even when their stables are warm. The world begins, in small collaborative acts, to rehearse an attention the listener cannot yet parse. There are physical sensations that the Dragonborn first will explain away. An itch at the base of the tongue that feels like a small insect walking in a place it shouldn't be. A metallic taste in the mouth after waking, lingering like the ghost of a coin. A faint vibration behind the eyes as if a distant drum is beating under frozen earth. Sometimes, when the Dragonborn is alone, They will hear a suggestion rise from their own chest, one syllable at the brink of becoming a shout, and then it will recede like a tide. These are not merely bodily symptoms. They are invitations. The body is preparing to speak a language with a demand for recognition. Night walks lengthen. The Dragonborn seeks out the quiet places at first to test the sensation. The lip of a river where frost dims like cloth, the broken cairn at the edge of a field, a low-set copse where the snow has thinned to reveal the dark lips of earth. In such places, the world seems to hold its breath. Snow muffles footsteps, but it cannot still the small intonations that hover above the surface. A low, thrumming hum in a groove of stone, a vibration that is not wind. The Dragonborn crouches and places their palm on cold rock, and, if you choose to trust the sensation, you will read a kind of response. The stone is not answering with words but with weight, the memory of something that has been pressed into it and is now, softly, pressing back. The Dragonborn's voice itself begins to show signs of shift. At first it is background, an unexpected resonance to speech, a longer hang at the end of a sentence. Friends remark on deepening tone. Companions joke that the Dragonborn sounds as if speaking through a mountain. These observations are casual, offered with mugs raised, and the Dragonborn laughs them off. But laughter itself begins to thin. After a shout used to open a locked gate or to fell a tree, there is a faint residue, an ache not unlike the afterburn of a fire, that builds in the back of the throat. It is a discomfort that can be medicated with rest, but rest does not fully remove it. The throat grows accustomed to a new register and resents being asked to return to its old timbre. Alongside physical shift comes a narrowing of perception. The Dragonborn notices their attention becoming selective in strange ways. Where they once took in faces and gestures as a whole, they begin to focus on edges. The angle of an eyebrow, the way a ring catches light. Small details cluster into meaning like ants into a line. They become adept at parsing signals other people miss. A trader's hesitation, the slight tremor of an arm. This is useful, often life-saving. But it comes with cost, a habit of omitting softness. The mind is training itself to treat the world as a problem set, input, analyze, respond. Tenderness is frequently the first casualty. The weather cooperates with the mood. Storms gather with a peculiar punctuality. A thin wind will press from the same direction at the same hour for 3 nights running. Clouds will roll over mountain tops and leave the summits black as coin. Aurora shimmer rhythmic, painting the sky with spidery veins. Sometimes the light breaks wrong. A day will dawn with the sun in a place that makes shadows fall at impossible angles, unsettling recognition of landscapes that become alien by simple inversion. People notice and ascribe reasons, omen, curse, the gods at play. Superstition hardens into rumor. Rumor becomes story. The story in your ear will always be the one to watch closely, because stories beg to be believed, and when belief sets in, the mind rearranges reality to accommodate it. Dreams, too, deepen their disturbance. The Dragonborn begins to wake from sleep with fragments clinging to them, snatches of draconic syllables that do not belong to any phrase they have learned, the sensation of a heavy, ancient mouth tasting the air. A dream might open on a landscape the Dragonborn thinks they know, a field they walked in childhood. But in the dream, a line of black stones curves through the field like a spine, and each stone hums with a single pitch. The sound coaxes memory into the frame, and the Dragonborn wakes with the shapes of those stones burned into the back of their eyes. In waking hours, they begin to notice similar markers in the world. Stones set with odd spacing, runes half-worn, familiar in ways they cannot place. This slippage between dream and day is the most dangerous. It makes the mind accept the impossible as a conditional reality. Companions observe changes and respond in human ways. Some step closer with concern. They offer balm, advice, a hand. These friends are treasures. They speak of the need to slow, to rest, to let the body and voice recover. Some counsel pilgrimage, to the graybeards, to a healer, to a shrine. Other companions withdraw, as people often do when confronted with transformation, a polite disengagement that reads like judgment. The watchful gaze of friends becomes, for the Dragonborn, an index of sanity. When looks are soft, the world feels manageable. When looks are sharp, the Dragonborn feels as if they're failing a test they never took. There are artifacts, objects, that are the first clear and fearful signs that something else is at work. Ancient amulets, fragments of a dragon-scribed tablet, a shard of a bone flute found in a drainage culvert. Each such object hums in proximity to the Dragonborn as if recognizing blood. The hum is not always audible. Sometimes it is tactile, a warmth under the palm, a humming like a sleeping insect. Once in the market, a merchant offers a small carved stone supposed to ward off bad luck. The stone vibrates when the Dragonborn draws near, almost imperceptibly. The merchant washes his hands of the sale as if touched by contagion. These artifacts are not merely relics. They are nodes, points where the old memory remembers itself. They mark trails that the Dragonborn has begun to walk whether they intended to or not. Frequently, there is a turning point moment, a small thing that becomes the hinge upon which the later story swings. Sometimes it is a voice that answers the Dragonborn's name in the hush of an abandoned chapel, not with sound, but with a pressure pushed against the skull, like thumbs pressed behind the eyes. Sometimes it is a draugr that blinks, as if remembering the dignity of life. Sometimes it is a child who will not look at the Dragonborn and whispers a plea that seems to come from dates in stone. The hinge can be accidental, a child's dropped toy, a mislaid rune, a cracked statue of an old god that exposes an inscription underneath. Whatever the precise form, the hinge will change the geometry of the night. After it, the world will begin to close subtly, like lungs letting out in a long, slow exhale that does not quite return. One evening, the Dragonborn will find a barrow with its mouth ajar in a way that makes the air smell of old iron. The opening is not large, just enough for one person to slip through, but it is maintained with the intention of invitation. Inside, sarcophagi glint under torchlight like teeth. The first draugr encountered move with the slow, ceremonial precision of a sleeper roused by a long-remembered order. Their eyes are not empty. They hold an intelligence not wholly of the living. They speak a sound like sand shifting, and in that sound the Dragonborn hears a fragment, an echo of their name, voiced as if by multiple throats at once. This is the first time the personal internal signal, the voice within, aligns with the ancient memory in the stone. It is as if the barrow recognizes the Dragonborn as kin. The encounter does not explode into violence at once. The draugr are careful, choreographed. They test with questions that have no temporal reference, phrases that feel like archaeology more than speech. The Dragonborn responds, sometimes with pride, "My name is so-and-so," or with silence because the questions have no clear answer. The draugr adjust. They probe with a cadence. The air thickens. For a moment there is a standoff that reads less like conflict, and more like a recognition process in a language of bone. When the draugr move to attack, it is not with a wild hunger, but with a mechanical precision that suggests they're correcting an omission. The Dragonborn's shout, called in reflex, is answered at the same pitch by the barrow itself. Stones vibrate. A dust fall can be heard like a ship drifting through a harbor of bones. The shout is effective. Doors crumble. Weapons are thrown back. Yet afterward the Dragonborn does not feel triumphant. There is something hollow in success, as if the shout has rearranged not only the physical structure but also the interior balance. Something within the chest feels shifted, recalibrated. After such an exchange, something else follows, residues. A week hence, the Dragonborn will find they recall, with unsettling clarity, the feel of the draugr's breath in the dark, the smell of tomb rot, the angle of a jaw. These are memories that the mind insists on indexing with a tenderness that feels wrong. They are traces left by a close encounter with antiquity. At times the Dragonborn will begin to dream in a pattern, a slow drum beat, a red line of stitches running through the world connecting stone to bone to mouth. Dreams are no longer restful. They are diagrams. In public places, the first small mass panics appear. A market goes quiet as several traders cross themselves. Sailors on a dock glance toward the distant horizon and mutter the names of saints as if in checklist. Travelers will spread word that the wind speaks in words and that the moon has a coldness like teeth. All of this is plausible to perform in a community living with omens. It is human to ritualize fear. What is less human is the way certain objects become sensitive to presence. Scroll cases tremble in a scholar's hand. Old war banners ripple though there is no wind. Soot gathers more quickly in hearths warmed by Dragonborn's company. The most practical-minded begin to tie talismans to beams, hang strips of white cloth to catch bad intentions. For a while, these rituals work, because action, even superstitious, can soothe a mind. The Dragonborn's companions start to have nightmares of their own. A companion may dream of being dressed in scales, their skin erupting into overlapping plates that hum. Another will wake with the taste of dust and blood in their mouths. These shared symptoms are an emergent pattern. Proximity breeds infection of imagination. The Dragonborn is not merely a patient of oddity. Their presence seems to retune the surroundings. Companions may joke nervously, then grow quiet. They may try to distance themselves, offering practical solutions. We'll rest elsewhere tonight. Avoid barrows. See a priest. Some friends, the most loyal, will stay, rubbing salves into the Dragonborn's neck, singing low songs for comfort. But loyalty is a test. Each act of staying wires another memory into the web. Loving someone who is changing is a small sacrifice, but sacrifices add up. There comes the first true failure. The Dragonborn, confident in their mastery, calls a shout to fell a beast that appears in the dusk. An elk gone mad perhaps, or a wolf with too many mouths in the imagination of a frightened child. The shout comes unbidden and with force. It cleaves the creature and the hillside alike. Its echo, however, returns altered. Where the Dragonborn expected the shout's tail to fade, it ricochets back with a lag, like sound smacking against a vast frozen surface. And instead of returning as emptiness, it returns as a phrase. The Dragonborn hears not the sound they produced, but something reshaped. Words articulated in a voice that is both their own and not. The throat convulses as if it was a borrowed instrument. For a moment the Dragonborn cannot distinguish interior from exterior. The voice that answers calls a name that is not theirs, a name that tastes of ancient salt and burned bone. It is the first time the voice in them seems to have independent grammar. Panic is not immediate. The Dragonborn analyzes, measures, tries to map the anomaly into something tidy. But the nest of questions grows. If their shout can be read and transformed by the world, what else can be? If a word can return with history embedded into it, how will the Dragonborn know which iteration of themselves is speaking? Each subsequent shout is approached with a new hesitancy. The pride of power is undercut by the terror of misrecognition. The final hours of this early phase close in with an accumulation of signs that are too many to dismiss. The Dragonborn finds an old rune stone half sunk in moss. Its groove is filled with an almost pulsing darkness that seems to drink the light. When the Dragonborn places their palm on it, the darkness blooms like a bruise and the ground hums underfoot. In the space between heartbeats there is a whisper, an instruction perhaps, or a memory. Remember the throat. The Dragonborn does not know what the command wants. They only know that their bones answer like a chord, instructed to strike a certain note. They feel the old voice stir as if from sleep. There may be a companion with them, someone who has stayed through more than most. The companion's eyes widen. They mutter a prayer that hovers between hope and horror. The rune stone accepts the touch, and then, without violence, another sound is born. A low, layered chant that seems to come from within the stone and from the Dragonborn all at once. The sensation vibrates the marrow. For a moment the world narrows to that single shared tone. Then it fractures. The chant splits into two frequencies. one harmonic and warm, one discordant and cold, and the difference is more than acoustic. Where harmony should have soothed, the discord creates a small eruption in the Dragonborn's throat. An involuntary syllable slips out, stained and foreign. The syllable calls a name in a tongue the Dragonborn does not know they know. You should feel how this is the exact beginning of something that will not stop. The small wrongnesses, whispers, misremembered dreams, the way animals watch, have coalesced. The shout has betrayed its maker. Stones sing like old friends who have been waiting too long. Companions carry the smell of the change with them into sleep. The Dragonborn finds themselves standing at the edge of an annexed reality, where the world not only receives their voice, but reshapes it and returns it with something older braided through. Before the night closes, there will be yet another sign, quieter and therefore more terrible. The Dragonborn wakes to find marks on their skin, tiny sigils that were not there before, delicate as frost and just as chilling. A hairline script curls like the edge of a new rune along their forearm. When pressed, the skin does not yield heat but a cool, distant sensation, as if touched by glacier water. The mark is not painful, it is a claim. It reads like a question, who remembers you? The Dragonborn will hide the mark under sleeve or bandage, but hiding is a temporary kindness. Marks are not secrets, they are contracts. The body keeps agreements the mind cannot see. As the early buildup concludes, an accumulation happens not all at once but like a tide that arrives in levels. Everything is recognizably the same as before. The same inns, the same market stalls, the same graybeard chants. But the axis has shifted. The simplest act, tying a boot, crossing a bridge, has become an act within an altered gravity. Where once choices were ordinary, they now ripple outward with new consequence. There is a patience to the night that wants the Dragonborn to speak. There is also, somewhere beneath, a patience that will reward them for silence. The month is turning. The wind rearranges its pattern. The world is learning the pitch of the voice it has in its keeping. In the quiet after these events, when friends have dispersed and the hearth cools, the Dragonborn will sit alone and feel the room resound with echoes. They will press a palm to the place on their skin where the rune curls and say their name aloud. It will feel like testing a lock with a key that fits but does not turn. The voice will answer, softer, layered, richer, bearing the remnant of the chant that once rose from the rune. For a breath, the Dragonborn will not be certain whether the sound came from their throat or from someplace further in, a place where the mountain keeps a hollow and a patient memory. This is the early horror. It is not explosion, it is calibration. It is not a monster appearing fully formed but a house settling in a new way, nails giving slightly under a shift. It is a shifting of the internal architecture that will make later horrors possible. Do not mistake its subtlety for mercy. It is, in its way, more intimate. It writes its initial stanza in the language of small betrayals, misplaced attention, altered tone, an animal's watchful pause, because intimacy makes undoing so much quieter and more precise. Remember the warm hand on the child's shoulder. Remember the graybeard's slow cadence. Hold the image of the stone that hummed. Keep the taste of bread in your mouth like an anchor. The night is patient. The voice in the Dragonborn stirs. The world will answer. In the next hours, the tone will thicken. The voice within will test its limits. The mountain will lean in. The first true rupture is near, and when it comes you will recognize its sound, because it will sound very much like your own name, called long and low into a dark that remembers everything. The wind teeth at the eaves with a new, impatient sound. What began as a hush is now a chorus. The mountain coughs, the snow exhales, the stones take up a rhythm that does not match the clock. Something has learned to keep time with your heartbeat. There is no sudden change, no thunderclap to mark a point of return. But there is a quality to the nights now that makes your skin feel as if the world is leaning in to listen. This is the hour where comfort peels away, slowly and insistently, like old skin. The crescendo is not a single scream but many small adjustments that gather into a pressure, then a weight, then an avalanche. You move through it like someone walking through deep water. Each step requires effort. Each breath is a measured negotiation. The Dragonborn is awake early and awake late. The moment when sleep would usually take them is now a fissure of vigilance. The voice inside, the voice that once felt like an instrument offered to the public, has become more of a partner with its own hunger. It no longer waits patiently for the Dragonborn's will. It nudges. It suggests. It offers solutions in syllables that bloom like molds beneath the tongue. At first the offers come as useful things. A shout to fell a gate, a breath to still a storm, a word that calms a panicked horse. Each success is a small victory and a small theft. With every demonstration, more eyes gather. Villagers at crossroads begin to watch with a new intensity. Priests cross themselves with trembling fingers. Children press faces to window panes, intent as birds. Praise arrives quick and saturating like oil. The Dragonborn drinks it, sometimes gratefully, sometimes without noticing the way it slicks the hands that would otherwise reach for something warmer. A friend's hand, a lover's answer, a neighbor's joke. But power is seldom content with being merely useful. Its appetite turns inquisitive. The voice inside begins to refine its requests. It suggests syllables halfway through a sentence, melodies at the edge of thought. You notice, on the edge of a conversation, that you almost say something you do not mean, and sometimes you do. The thing inside you tests boundaries with the same slow curiosity that an animal might test the wall of a pen. It nudges at the lock. It asks, "What happens if I take this? What is yours if not this?" The first moments of fragility show up in the small mercies denied. The Dragonborn postpones a visit to an ailing mother, because a shout's practice might sharpen the voice needed for a task tomorrow. A companion's birthday goes unremarked because there is an urgent need to travel at dawn. None of this seems catastrophic. It is the kind of erosion that is invisible until it is a gulf. The small kindnesses are not merely habits. They are the scaffolding that holds a person together. Remove them piece by patient piece, and the house will at last tilt. There are more dangerous intrusions than mere neglect. The voice begins to speak to others. It is subtle at first. A phrase echoes at the edge of a tavern conversation and is repeated by a stranger's gaggle. A lullaby the Dragonborn murmured falls into a child's dreams in the next room, altered in ways that make the skin crawl. Then the voice grows bolder. Once, and only once in the memory of those present, the Dragonborn hears, in the hush of a winter dawn, an answer spoken in the same cadence as their own inner syllables but not spoken by them. A thin, layered echo that threads through the inn's rafters and returns to the Dragonborn, as if the building itself were repeating a private secret. Companions who have stood close begin to falter in visible ways. A warrior friend who laughed easily now walks with a hand pressed to the side of the head, murmuring when the wind moves through a certain pass. Another companion awakes from sleep with clawed impressions along the arms, as if paws had closed, but did not belong to any beast. These are not merely symptoms of fear, but of something more invasive. The nearby world adopts a different grammar and begins to speak in it. Shared space becomes a shared rewriting. The chorus of omens grows louder and stranger. The wolves that used to run in packs now stalk alone, eyes shining with a wet intelligence. A flock of ravens circles, not above a carcass but above a farmhouse, and settles silently in a pattern that looks suspiciously like a sigil. In a quiet valley, the river runs backward for a night and the fish float like relics to the surface. People who witness such things do not always know how to attach words to them, so they make gestures toward old superstitions, tug at talismans, tie salt to thresholds. But not all acts of precaution work. You can pray until the thread goes thin. You can burn incense until the smoke blanks out the memory of the sound, and still the underlying cadence will not be soothed. At the center of the pattern, the Dragonborn begins to experience something that is both more intimate and more terrifying than external signs: disassociation. There are moments, brief and then longer, where the Dragonborn is not quite where their body sits. A thought springs up, an intent to move a hand or to speak, and there is a lag as if who is to act waits for permission from somewhere else. It is as if a joint has gone stiff and you need two hands to ease it. These lags are not just inconveniences, they are aperture points, little doors through which other things can enter. Once you notice the doorway, you begin to worry about what might be on the other side. Then there are the dreams that refuse to stay put. The boundary between sleeping and waking becomes porous to the point of incompetence. A dream might begin as a conversation with a graybeard at High Hrothgar, the kind of lesson the Dragonborn has learned to trust. But those lessons begin to end with a strange insistence. The graybeard will turn mid-lesson, and his beard will unspool into the throat of a dragon. The mountain will open not in guidance but with a maw, and some slow, ancient thing will lean forward and whisper a single word that tastes like copper. You wake with your mouth full of language you cannot translate, and with an ache behind the eyes that is like grief for something you did not think you had lost. There are physical corruptions that no salve can touch. Skin takes on small aberrations, a faint scale-like shimmer along a knuckle, the thin, iridescent map of a vein that looks suspiciously like the pattern of a dragon's wing. These changes are at first cosmetic, then structural. Fingers thicken, joints adapt to pressure, hair becomes stiff at the crown. The Dragonborn may catch themselves reflexively reaching for a talon rather than a sword hilt. That image will horrify you then and haunt, because change is not just aesthetic. It alters how one perceives intention. A fist will close differently when it has been taught by something with the mind to grip differently. One of the cruelest features of this crescendo is the way memory contorts. The Dragonborn occasionally finds then loses minutes, then hours. A morning is gone like a page torn from a book. When companions question them, they may not recall the route taken, or the words exchanged, or the exact posture of the elder they visited. In one instance, you will laugh about an old tavern rhyme. In the next, you will be reciting a chant in a language that maps to mountain breathing. Memory is porous when pressure rises. It lets in the new material like silt into fresh water. After a while, you cannot trust whether an action is your own or had been invited by another voice. And the world matches this confusion with a syntax of its own. The stones hum with a vocabulary of cloistered things, crackles that translate to names, fissures that whisper verbs. In places of power, barrows, standing stones, ruined temples, this vocabulary intensifies into something that reads like entreaty. The Dragonborn visits one such place in a fit of defiance, thinking to test the limits of their control. It starts as curiosity and turns into ritual. They place palms on a slab and try to will a language into the stone. The stone answers by burying them in a chorus that is both opiate and razor, a lullaby at the price of a fissure opened in the mind. Voices from the stone file through the Dragonborn's throat in guttural cadences that fuzz at the edges of comprehension, and through them, the stone bargains. It offers a vision, a future in which the Dragonborn is no longer a hinge but a crowning. It promises clarity, a kind of destiny without the messy surprise of new emotions. You will almost agree to it. The way it is offered is intoxicating. The vision is sumptuous and seems to fill the emptiness you have felt in the hollowed places of your past. Why not? Why not accept a certainty? Yet to agree is to sign a contract in a dialect that will hollow you once translated. Acceptance is not a one-time capitulation. It is a gradual surrender. The crescendo feeds on consent given in tiny, mutual steps. The Dragonborn's companions perceive the change in blunter strokes. They argue. They plead. They pick fights to distract, to keep the Dragonborn from listening to the old song. These interventions sometimes work. A brawl in the market draws the Dragonborn's attention away, and for an hour, maybe two, the inner voice quiets. But the quiet is tactical and temporary. When night settles and the embers dwindle, the voice resumes like a tide. Companions grow exhausted. Their patience thins like ice in spring. Some leave quietly, claiming other business. Others shout into the wind and demand the Dragonborn choose between them and the mounting hunger. Each departure is another loss that the voice turns into space for itself. That is what makes fury and sorrow such effective tools for it. They create emptiness into which the other thing can pour. And then there are the instances of direct violence where power's corruption is no longer a slow erasure, but a literal tearing. The Dragonborn may face a band of marauders on a lonely road and use the thumb with a force that is surgical and terrifying. Flesh and armor disintegrate in unmatched proportion, but the aftermath is not calm. Rather, it is a compounding shock. The Dragonborn will see, in a survivor's eye or in the wetness of a dying man's mouth, the reflection of their own echo. That reflection is not pity. It is recognition, an understanding that what has been unleashed is not purely defense, but a force that smites with an almost recreational precision. The Dragonborn has, in some crucial sense, become an instrument of judgment, and that instrument prefers a certain cadence. It will demand to be used again. The psychological price of such acts is steep. After one such attack, the Dragonborn stop sleeping from the memory of light bending oddly across a skull. They recall how the rope of a shout cut like a knife, precise and clean, and they learn to crave the simplicity of such outcomes when the world offers complexity and hesitation. The voice that suggests a shout at times behaves like a friend who offers a fix. Say it, it says softly. It will make it easier. And you, tired and thin, long for easy. That is how appetite refines itself into addiction. But what is addiction in this landscape? It is a hunger that is not always pleasurable and not always satisfied by the expected fill. Sometimes the voice offers more complicated requests, sacrifices that do not shimmer as gore but as metaphors. An item, a kept promise, a betrayal of a small, crucial trust. The Daedric whispers are the most adept at this. They do not always ask for slaughter. They demand the softer deaths of what makes someone human, the ease of trust, the habit of generosity, the private promise kept to a lover. When those are given, the exchange leaves a hollow that trembles. A person who chose to let a friend suffer in silence, because the shout could clean up the mess now, has a hole in the place where compassion used to sit. That hole is a shape the voice likes. The world itself begins to betray private conspiracies. Northern lights that once soothed now seem to sketch runes in the sky that are visible for an instant and then collapse like steam. Rivers chant in inaudible syllables. Elders, those who remember the old ways, begin to draw lines between patterns we would set aside as coincidence. They press palms to their chests and say, rarely and with trembling, that the balance is shifting and not toward anything like an equilibrium. The language for this new condition is scant in all polite scrolls. It is an unnameable turning, rare and ancient, a dialect of weather and hunger in which the land itself plays a role in the seduction. There are episodes of loss that fix themselves as marks on the Dragonborn's body and soul. One night the Dragonborn wakes to find a wound on their side, not deep but circular, like the imprint of a coin. It is neither fresh nor healed. Over the days it pulses faintly, a beat synchronous with the shifts of the moon. When they press it, a syllable leaks from their lips, a sound that is not consciously formed, like a note in the back of the throat that tastes of smoke and iron. It is terrifying because it is both foreign and familiar. It is intimate because it writes itself into the living flesh. The wound is a punctuation. The world is annotating the body with meaning no human law can read. At the height of the crescendo, the Dragonborn experiences something akin to possession, but without full foreclosure of self. It is a dividing of agency rather than a replacement. For a stretch of time, hours, then days, the voice will assert itself not as suggestion but as will. It pushes thought aside, proposes action as if it has the right to our hands. It points to a ruin and insists on travel. It demands a shout in the wrong place at the wrong time. You attempt to resist, and resistance is exhausting and sometimes futile. When the shout finally falls from the lips in spite of refusal, it feels like having watched someone else strike a match in your mouth. The crescendo is not a single stream. It is layered. Physical alteration, communal expectation, compulsion, addiction, ritual pressure, prophetic language, and the slow depletion of those soft human practices that keep an upright life from tipping. Each layer feeds the next. The dragon soul in the chest learns to read the world's appetite for it, and the world refines its appetite in reaction to the dragonborn's give. And then there is the cruelty of feedback. Every shout that breaks a siege or saves a life brings a new chorus of gratitude and new small permissions. People assume the dragonborn's hand is steady and always available to repair a problem. The grateful look that arrives afterward reinforces the pattern and makes refusal harder. The dragonborn is a public resource. One acts for the many and then is judged for failing to be enough. The voice uses gratitude as leverage. It will whisper, "They need you," and the echo of need is calamitously seductive. At last the world displays a final, undeniable sign, an event that is both spectacle and moral measurement. A village on the edge of emptiness, homes wedged near a cliff that the wind bites at, experiences a night of unnatural storm. The weather turns malevolent and fast. Roofs tear and a torrent of wind slices a path of ruin. People scream. In the heart of the chaos, a child hangs from a broken beam over a pile of splintering wood. The dragonborn arrives with companions and all eyes are fixed on them. The voice inside them whispers the most practical response: shout. It is immediate, promising salvation in a single syllable. The shout will have the power to still the crash, to lift the child from danger. It will also, the instinct says in a cold undertow, draw the attention of something that prefers the world be whole for its own predatory purposes. The dragonborn faces a choice that feels both moral and surgical. You do the shout. It is clean and magnificent. The roaring breath folds the storm like a hand folding paper. The child is saved and lowered into sobbing arms. People shout gratitude, candles are relit. A hymn starts up by reflex. You should feel triumphant because you have saved a life. But the aftermath will not be simple. In the charred place where the shout met wind and wood, small fissures awake in the ground like mouths opening. From those fissures, a rain of black ash falls, and with it comes a sound, small at first, that grows into a chorus everyone can feel in their molars. It is not a human chant. It is a layered, massive thing that carries a hunger. The world's answer to your shout is not only gratitude, it is appetite. In the stunned moments that follow, the dragonborn understands that the shout has been read not as rescue, but as a signal. Whatever listens in the hidden corridors of age and stone has recognized the frequency and responded. It was not to the child, but to you. The painted eyes of the village folk look up at you with the same intensity as supplicants expecting miracles. Only now the miracle is a summons and a judgment. The crescendo reaches an apex here because the cost of your easiest, most heroic act is now revealed. The world demands and has been answered. Something ancient stirs, pleased and curious and hungry. You have spoken in a language older than the registers of men, and it has answered not with gratitude but with interest. This is the last piece in the ladder that the night has been building. The voice in you is no longer satisfied with being a tool for petty crises. It has demonstrated that it can call, and it has called into a darkness that hears keenly. You will feel panic now, or maybe a cold, skeletal kind of clarity. The voice inside is excited, and it tugs at plans and at tender places. You will see the village parents clutch their children and look to you not only as savior, but as the opening of a door none of you had intended to unlock. Companions will hold you and ask what must come next. There is no neat answer. The thing that listened is patient. The thing that listens is old. Its temperament is not human. The crescendo is complete because the reveal is total. Your power is both miraculous and dangerous precisely because it is legible. The act that saves has also exposed a channel. The applause that comforts the people has become, in another register, a clarion for predators. As the night cools and the ash settles in static whorls on the window sills, The Dragonborn sits by the embers and wonders what remains of them. You can count losses like coins, small payments in missed meals, layered griefs in lovers turned heads, the cooling of laughter. But there is an immaterial tax too, the knowledge that your voice now belongs in part to a language that learns to require you. That knowledge distills into a tonic that is not sweet. The crescendo does not resolve into catastrophe here. It resolves into a terrifying clarity of stakes. The voices in the mountain have been listened to. The world has sung back. The Dragonborn has used their voice in a way that has consequences the size of weather. There is no victory in the sound of the saved child's sob, only a new ledger entry in an account the Dragonborn never intended to open. Feel the ash settle like a sedative and like a weight. The mountain is waiting for the next frequency. The voice at your back is patient and sharp and has an idea of what you might yet do. The crescendo of horror is not an endpoint. It is the making of a threshold. The next moment, the one that moves beyond pressure into the full, cold detail of revealed intent, is imminent. Hold your breath for a moment if you can, with the weight of what you have done in your fist. Count the losses that made this possible. Name the small kinds of tenderness you still keep. Feel their warmth like fragile coals on a palm. This will be both anchor and wound. When the wind changes direction, and you hear, perhaps as a laugh, the low response from the stone and from the far dark beyond, you will know the thing that waited while you warmed yourself at the hearth has now been given a reason to wake. The real test has begun. The mountain does not shout. The mountain waits and remembers. Tonight, the mountain speaks in a dozen small violences at once. A cracking of ice like old bone, the slow fall of a cornice, the whisper of stone shifting as if something under it turned. You are at the center of a circle that has been slowly closing for months, if not years. Each small wrongness has been a notch on a great hinge, each whisper a key rubbed in a lock. Now the lock begins to turn. The air tastes metallic, like the inside of a coin. The village that once seemed a pocket of ordinary life is a pale theater of motion. Lanterns bob, doors open and close with slow, deliberate hands. Faces pressed to windows in the knowledge that something not quite named has arrived. You keep thinking of the child you saved, the warm smallness in your arms and then the sour ash on the wind. That saving was a signal. That signal has a listener with long patience. Everything is faster than it felt an hour ago. Your limbs are precise, and your mind therefore liable to sharpness. The voice in your chest has grown accustomed to being taken seriously. It does not ask now. It expects. It finds pathways through 100 small permissions you gave in desperation, in pride, in kindness. In a whisper half pleading and half command, it suggests a path. A ruin on the far side of the valley, a place of old worship older than names, where a dragon bone forms the keystone of a long-closed door. You do not plan to go, and yet you find your pack on your shoulder before memory has the space to protest. Companions move with you, some by choice, some because their feet have learned to follow yours, and the road unrolls under a sky cinched with aurora. The air picks up the scent of rot and sugar, an odd and sickly mix that sets the teeth on edge. A raven flies ahead and then halves at the last moment, dropping into a clump of wind-stunted heather as if to watch. As you approach the ruin, the world narrows to its edges. Stones, bone, runes half buried in frost. This is a place that remembers being used, and it remembers with a sound like metal on metal. Soft, patient, remorseless. The entry yawns wider than it should, as if someone, something, has been waiting with its hand on the latch. The threshold smells like old breath and river silt. Your throat tightens at the animal knowledge that you are crossing a line that will not allow you to step back unchanged. Inside, the corridor is a ribcage of black stone, and the light you carry stutters as if annoyed. The torch beam reveals reliefs of dragons in mid-roar, leads of carved runes whose edges are as sharp as teeth. The very air seems to chant, low and repeated. The frequency is not fixed but elastic, like taut skin being plucked. The drumbeat of your blood matches the rhythm. Somewhere further in there is the cold intelligence of a thing that studies syllables the way a spider studies flies. You are not supposed to be the key, the old texts told. You are supposed to be a warning. Prophecies are like that, either avertible or misread. What the runes on the lintel actually say is a half-fossil phrase you have seen in dreams, its corners eaten by time. The tongue that opens is the tongue that closes. In the heat of the corridor, the meaning uncoils like a serpent. The voice that opens the world is the voice that the world will one day close upon. It is not malicious so much as inevitable. The chamber at the heart of the ruin is round and vast, lined with standing ribs of basalt that radiate inward like the spokes of a wheel. In the center is a great slab of dragon bone, milky and veined with oil-dark seams. The bone seems to drink the light. Around it, smaller bones lie like discarded teeth, bones of men, of wolves, of something else whose shape the torch will not allow you to see. The runes ring the rim of the central slab in a loop like a speaking tongue. Your voice hums at them as if called, or perhaps it is your marrow answering to something older than hearing. Before you can name the sensation, a dragon voice fills the chamber. Not a living dragon's triumphant roar, but a memory of one, layered and ancient. It is not speech so much as an alignment. The whole room answers like a bell. The air vibrates in the hollows of your teeth. The voice is not outside you. It is inside and behind your ribs, like muscle remembering the cadence of a drum. And in that voice, so exquisite and terrible, you hear your name rendered and unmade at once. A composite of your ancestry and something older, a syllable that tastes like a cliff face at dawn. The first violent thing that happens is small, too small to be legend, too precise to be coincidence. A companion drops to the floor with a hand over their mouth, eyes wide with a terrible lucidity. They whisper a single phrase, an apologetic, ridiculous phrase, before their features slacken as if someone has released a string. Their breath is shallow now, and when you touch their shoulder, your hand meets a coolness as if a stone had replaced living heat. The sight sears itself into your mind. For a second, you imagine the companion asleep. For a second, you tell yourself they will wake. Then the scream starts from somewhere beyond the chamber, and you realize that the thing that choked them is not sleep. The scream is not only human, it is layered. A human cry threaded with a sound like the shudder of a glacier, the hiss of steam under pressure, the bark of a creature with no throat. The bones in the chamber answer and vibrate with the scream, and there is an immediate, almost reflexive response in your chest, an urge to shape a shout that will reorder the air. Your hand closes into a fist without your consent. The voice inside you warms, an eager instrument. In that warm, collared longing, something in you recognizes the pattern of hunger in the chamber. Then the floor gives. It is not a collapse in a single place, but the slow pressing of a dozen fissures that open and bloom. The ribs of basalt tilt and slide like the slow closing of a jar. Dust falls in a downpour and the torchlight becomes fractal, scattering into shards that look for all the world like falling stars. Through the smoke you see movement. Not shadow, but a suggestion of forms, like silhouettes pressed against a skin of steam. The silhouettes are too many to be dragons and too purposeful to be wind. They are not always the shape of animals. Sometimes they are hands, sometimes they are coils, sometimes they are long, pearled things that could be vertebrae and could be nothing at all. Panic is clean. You shout to companions, you shout to the air. Your voice slashes and the chamber answers, slow as tide. With each shout, fissures widen and new voices reply, not responsive but conversational, as if the world is reading out of a communal script. The voice returns in layers, not entendre but reinterpreted consequence. It is as if the chamber was waiting to be spoken into, and now that you have done so, it begins to perform its long, patient ritual. Doors that were closed open across the land simultaneously. In the far village, elders fall to their knees. In the city on the coast, a bell that has not rung in a century tolls 13 times and stops. These are ripples. When the first true roar answers your shout in the ruin, It is like hearing centuries exhale. The dragon memory speaks, not to you but through you. For a beating instant, you are sure your hands are not yours. You feel as if your limbs have become laboratory instruments, precise and a little alien. Blood is always the honest measure of change. A thin line runs down the center of the dragonbone slab, and from it seeps a black that is not coagulate but ink, thick and fumy and warm. The black pools and forms into runes of its own, writing aloud in viscosity. As the script unspools, it traces your name in fragments, then collapses into a symbol that tightens like a noose around a concept. Hinge. A hinge is not a hero. A hinge is the thing upon which doors turn. In the center of the chamber, something not wholly object, stirs in the bone like a mouth remoistening after sleep. It exhales and the breath smells of ash and sea. You feel it combing through the inside of your skull like cold fingers. The voice in your chest begins to articulate not in words but in need. Not hunger, not yet, but a precise taxonomy of wants. It names things that belong not to you. Crowns, carved thrones, cities wrapped in the ribbons of your voice. It promises an end to hesitation. It offers the clarity of a blade's edge. Decisive, clean, fatal. You realize, with a clarity that does not comfort, that the chamber's demand is not simply for power used, but for use that changes the order of attention. The thing in the bone wants you to re-sing the world. It is not necessarily malevolent. It is simply very old and very good at reading how humans respond to demonstration. It knows that when you impact your world, break a gate, topple a granite, it creates a notch that will be answered. It wants more not because it loves blood, but because it recognizes an instrument in you. Then the true, terrible consonance happens. What has been an internal voice and what sits in the ruin merge. The sensation is not violent at first. It is more like contact. Cold heat moves along the back of your throat, and in that coolness, you hear a chorus of ancient tongues reciting your name as if claiming it, then unmaking it, stretching it across syllables that are not designed for human mouths. It is ecstasy and dissolution at once. Your hands move, not without your consent, but with a priority that is not personal anymore. You begin to speak in a language that is only partly yours and wholly older. Each syllable is a small earthquake in the topography of the nearby world. A village bell shatters 3 valleys away. Windows fog in towns that have never seen your face. Beneath the collapse of geological time, something tragically domestic happens. You watch a friend, someone whose face you know intimately, turn toward you and smile with an expression that used to be naive but now reads like the auto-tune of a puppet. Their eyes are pale as bone. They raise a hand in a gesture of benediction, and then their hand makes a small knife shape and moves toward their own throat. In the confused chorus of the chamber, 1,000 hands find their throats at once. Gasps become syllables. The act is not for death but for interface. They press lips to throat and recite the echo of the script that the bone demands, a litany of sealing and saying. Those who resist are convulsed by a nausea that is not bodily but mnemonic, as if their memories were being overwritten with neat, surgical deletions. Plead your name. Try to summon the old warmth that kept you human. The syllables come out thin and metallic. Friends fall on their knees. Some scream. Others lift their faces and laugh as if at a private joke. You try to stop the sound, but the throat has an independent momentum. The voice is a river. It has drowned part of the banks and claimed new channels. The chant accelerates, becomes recursive. It calls to something further in the mountain, and whatever listens begins to rock. It is then the dragon's answer, not dragons as beasts but as cartographers of sovereignty. A distant, layered cry rolls across the peaks and the ruins, and with it a flocking of shapes appears in the sky. Dragons, not in the straightforward bestiality of legend, but as shimmering outlines stitched from the aurora itself. They circle above the ruin like a congregation of knives, watching the right below. The wings beat with a rhythm that is not wind but calculation. Each beat marks a silent ledger entry. Their eyes glint with something like hunger and recognition both. The chamber becomes a throat. What you say shapes valleys and opens doors to other rooms in the mountain where old councils convene. The bones of elder worms, the relics of kings who wore their crowns like swords. Those rooms are not content with being rooms. They prefer to be authorities. They begin to weigh in with their voices. The chorus is a species of deliberation. Should the hinge be turned? Does the world require a new order? The bone seems about to answer when something interrupts the debate. A hum, a thin, human interruptive, curling down the corridor like a lifeline. You are not alone in your resistance. Not everyone present has been seduced or bound. A few companions, those whose loyalty is older than enthusiasm or who have stubbornness as a habit, fight back. They physically pull you away from the slab. They drag hands over your mouth. The cold of their palms is salvation for a beat. They attempt to throttle the chant, to stop the syllables mid-flight. You feel yourself pulled between 1,000 histories, the one where you refuse and reclaim yourself, and the one where you release and are made into what the chamber needs. For a moment you taste both, the copper of control and the sweet iron of surrender. One companion asks you, in a voice suddenly human and full of terror, to choose. They tell you what you have already felt in your chest for days, that every shout is an accounting not only of the present, but of a ledger the mountain keeps. They crawl across the stone floor and place their forehead against the bone slab and beg the thing to be merciful. For an instant you think mercy might be a possibility, an ancient thing that has been dormant but not absent. The bone hums and a single answer unfolds. It is not mercy in the human sense. Rather, it is the equable consideration of what will last. Some things are chosen to persist, others to be consumed. The answer is not a simple judgment, but a scale. To open is to alter the world in a way that will make it sing for centuries. To refuse is to preserve the fragile human things that have no market value in the ledger the mountain keeps. The true cruelty is that either choice costs. You realize the deeper pattern the mountain knows. Everything that persists requires a vacancy somewhere else. The bone asks you to be available for its bookkeeping. There is a rupture then, an embodied one. The slab slides aside like the lid of a sarcophagus and reveals a hollow darker than absence. Within it lies a thing that is not dragon and not fossil, but an eye turned inward, like a mirror that remembers. It is a congregation of small teeth and thin, oily membranes that shimmer as if wet. The thing is ancient enough that its policies are procedural, habits rather than intentions. It reaches, not with malice but with an administrative hunger. When its tendrils uncoil, they brush your skin and a cold, thick sensation flows into you. It is like being insured in the language of another age. You have two choices now that have already been made by lesser choices. You can fight, in the blunt way of bone and muscle, against the slow, administrative demand of the thing, or you can accept and become its instrument of registration. To fight is to risk annihilation. To accept is to risk becoming a ledger entry yourself. Your companions scream, some in defiant rage, others in grief. The thing speaks and its voice is not in your mouth but in your spine. Sign and be signed. It promises memory and power and an absence of doubt. It tells you the shape your life will take if you allow it to indwell. Order, consequence, the rightness of being noticed. You want, with everything human in you, to refuse. You imagine the faces of those you love and the smell of bread and the warmth of the hearth. You think of the child saved, now perhaps part-signaled into a new fate because of your shout. You shift your weight and prepare to shout against the chamber, to tear the thing out of the ruin with a noise that will make the mountain bleed. But the voice inside is stronger now. It strings advice that sounds like logic. It shows you futures the bone calls by name. Cities set right, tyrants toppled, orders made tidy. It offers the satisfaction of an end to messy indecision. You remember being that child again, and you remember the way a hero feels when a small hand clasps their own. The memory is a knife that both wounds and is warm. For a moment, the thought of wielding your voice to do something final, for the good, for power, for certainty, is intoxicating. Then you remember the tiny habitual kindnesses you would lose, the easy smiles and the unremarked mercy that costs nothing but everything. It is not a heroic choice as you imagined in tavern stories. It is an arithmetic of absence. Suddenly, the bones tendrils tight. The chamber's deliberation has ended. The mountain decides not to permit your ambivalence further. It will not ask politely anymore. The tendrils press into you like cold ligatures. They trace a glyph along the curve of your ribs behind the heart. The sensation is violation and naming at once. A syllable, your name altered, slips into the chamber air like a seal closing. The voice inside you blooms with joy. The thing in the bone hums with an administrative purr. You have time for one last shout, one last human act of refusal. Time is thin as paper and tears if you attempt to hold it. You gather breath, the innermost human one, filled with the ghosts of laughter and the names of those you would save. You push sound outward with everything that remains yours and not the mountain's. The shout is ragged and beautiful and bright. It cracks the chamber like sunlight on ice. For a shattering, fragile instant, you feel free, unlabeled, and the tendrils shudder. The bone's grip loosens. The ruin thrums like a struck glass and everything tilts. That moment is the hinge on which 1,000 fates pivot. You feel the mountain's anger as a pressure that wants to correct you for the disturbance. The tendrils, thwarted in the center, lash out to the periphery. A pane of the sky above cracks and a shard of aurora snakes down like a knife. The dragon forms in the air respond not with guidance but with fury. They are creatures of appetite and of custom, and you have transgressed their code. Their eyes, if they can be called eyes, glitter like cold coins. One larger, older shape drops lower and the air screams about it with a new register, a sound like the tearing of maps. You fall or are pulled into a place beneath the ruin where the mountain keeps its oldest vows. It is not a grave so much as an office of memory. There are rows of shelves made of vertebrae and skull, neat as a scriptorium. There are jars, some holding maps, some holding the breath of storms, some with the recorded syllables of dead kings. A single shelf holds a small object, a child's wooden horse, worn to near smoothness. Your fingers close around it for a second and you feel, like a bell struck, the old human warmth of the world. The nearby things sense it and their attention, if bones attend shifts. A tendril retracts, distracted by the memory. Companions seize that distraction and push against the tendrils with the full force of flesh. Maybe you win, maybe you fail. The final moments are both and neither. Your shout, failing or triumphing, leaves an afterimage on the world. It is a bruise the shape of a name. It is an imprint that will persist. You may force the bone closed. You may pry it open. Either way, something has been learned. The mountain has recorded the voice, and the thing that records is not satisfied with mere documentation. It wants usage. When you stagger out into the cold air, and the ruin slants behind you like a wound, the world you return to is not precisely the one you left. The aurora has a new pattern in its veins. Birds move in a choreography they did not know before. A choir of distant bells sounds 3 notes out of silence and then stops. Your companions are fewer. The ones who remain are raw with the memory of what they saw. In the village that watches you return, there are faces that are not afraid and faces that are changed. Eyes burnt with recognition and with calculation. Some cross themselves quietly. Others whisper new prayers to old gods. The mountain does not sleep. It never has. Even as the wind dies down and the snow settles in quiet drifts over the ruins, the memory of the chamber lingers in the folds of rock and frost. You can feel it in the hollow spaces of the village, in the way lanterns sway without a breeze, in the faint tremor under your feet as you walk. The Dragonborn's body is here, yes, but there is something else threaded inside it now. The echo of a voice older than mountains, a record-keeping intelligence that never blinks, never forgets, and always watches. The companions who survived follow quietly, their eyes darting toward shadows and shapes that you do not see, yet feel in your spine. Their presence is both comfort and caution. Each one bears a subtle mark of the ruin, a small shift in posture, a flicker of unease that betrays the fact that even those untouched by the tendrils of bone carry the knowledge of what they witnessed. You speak little because words feel fragile, inadequate against the weight of what has been learned. Every syllable threatens to open another fissure, summon another echo. At night, when you attempt sleep, the lingering sound is not silence. The mountain hums in memory, a low vibration that threads through stone and timber alike. Sometimes it is in the sighing of the wind, sometimes in the drip of water in dark corners. You feel it in your own chest, as if your ribs have learned a new rhythm, one that belongs not entirely to you. Dreams are no longer private. You relive moments from the ruin, but the details shift, morphing into shapes and voices that were never present or never entirely human. You wake with a taste of ash in your mouth, the memory of bone scraping against bone, and a sense that the chamber is waiting for your return. Even if you are miles away, even if you are certain of distance, your powers, the voice, the thumb, have grown sharper, but their use carries a different weight now. Every shout, every incantation, every subtle manipulation of magic or sound is a ledger entry, a trace for the mountain and its strange, patient intelligence to record. You feel compelled to measure, to calculate, to weigh the cost of even the smallest act. A fire started to cook a meal becomes more than warmth. It is a signal. A conversation held in private becomes a ledger of allegiance. The Dragonborn has learned, reluctantly, that freedom is measured in degrees of consent. Companions begin to leave, some quietly, some abruptly. They cannot bear the constant pressure of being near someone who carries a whispering conduit to an ancient and inhuman will. Each departure leaves a residue of emptiness, a space the ruin itself seems to notice and covet. When a friend leaves, you feel a tremor in the air, subtle but unmistakable, like the ripple of a pond struck by invisible hands. Even those who remain seem distant, as if the ruin has rearranged the gravity of human connection, pulling the warmth of your life into its cold orbit. The villages you pass carry the faint echoes of what occurred. Children remember the black ash, the strange rhythms of a shout that warped time and sound. Elders speak in hushed tones of patterns in the aurora, of signs in rivers and wind, of ruins that are awake and listening. You realize the Dragonborn is no longer a mere traveler. You are a signal amplifier, a hinge between the human world and something vast, deliberate, and unmoved by morality. Even kindness becomes currency, measured by how it alters the ledger of observation the mountain keeps. Time itself seems warped. Days bleed into nights with an unnatural elasticity. You may wake to a sunrise you do not remember climbing toward, or feel a dusk settle with no recollection of the hours in between. The mountains watch, but not with impatience. Their awareness is meticulous. Each breath, each heartbeat, each subtle gesture is catalogued. You realize in moments of quiet that the ruin is not a place but a consciousness, and it has taken residence in memory, in habit, in the very rhythm of living. Even your thoughts are not entirely your own. The voice, now a resident in your chest, speaks softly, rarely intrusively, but with undeniable influence. It suggests actions, preemptively nudges decisions, and reframes perception. You are aware enough to recognize the intrusion, but recognition does not equal control. The boundaries of self have blurred. You speak to companions and hear echoes of the ruin's grammar in their replies. You perform the simplest tasks and feel a subtle pull, as if your motions are being weighed for alignment with a will older than the hills. When you attempt to return to normalcy, rituals of home, moments of intimacy, casual walks, the world subtly resists. Trees bend in ways that suggest observation. Animals pause, regarding you with sharp awareness. The air itself seems to carry fragments of the ruin's rhythm, so that even a simple conversation feels like a negotiation. Your senses, sharpened by months of exposure to the mountain's intelligence, detect layers and currents invisible to others. You begin to hear patterns in footsteps, textures in the wind, hierarchies in shadows. Every movement, no matter how small, is subject to observation. The Dragonborn's dreams continue, but they are no longer refuges. They are passages to the ruin, arenas of negotiation and reflection. You see yourself walking corridors of bone, sometimes alone, sometimes accompanied by fragments of companions or strangers, always under the weight of distant eyes. The floor trembles beneath your feet, or it feels as though the air itself is vibrating with expectation. Shadows twist into forms that are half familiar, half impossible. In these dreams, you encounter impossible creatures, neither dragon nor man, whose presence is suffocatingly calm yet impossible to resist. They do not speak in words but in intention, and you understand them in the gut before your conscious mind can process the translation. The line between waking and dreaming has become perilously thin. You awaken in rooms that should feel safe but carry impressions of the ruin's geometry. Door frames seem slightly skewed, walls subtly shifted, corners sharper than they ought to be. When you step outside, the landscape itself appears to mirror the ruin's internal architecture. Hills fold like bone, streams curve in impossible angles, trees twist with a deliberate asymmetry. You catch yourself recalibrating constantly, a subtle measure of reality against the memory of the chamber. Your interactions with people are strained. Villagers and travelers feel the gravity of the ruin as they encounter you, often without understanding why. Some bow or avert their gaze instinctively, as though responding to signals they cannot see. Others cling desperately to old superstitions, whispering charms, murmuring prayers, or avoiding you entirely. You realize that your presence is now an event, a variable in the world that cannot be ignored. Even a kind gesture, a saved child, a healed wound, a shared meal, carries the weight of consequence beyond what you can measure. Power itself has become a source of unease. Using the thumb, manipulating magic, even ordinary speech, all carry an aftertaste of accountability. Every act, however minor, is catalogued, assessed, and remembered. You hesitate before simple interventions, weighing potential outcomes against the invisible ledger that grows with each breath. The voice in your chest, the echo of the ruin, is patient but insistent, a reminder that nothing occurs without observation. Loneliness deepens. Companions who remain are cautious, restrained by awareness of what the ruin has wrought in you. Others are gone, leaving spaces in memory and in the world that cannot be replaced. Even when surrounded, there is a sense of isolation, a realization that part of you has been claimed, not violently, but irrevocably. The Dragonborn is never truly alone, yet never entirely among the living. You exist in two planes simultaneously, the human world and the resonant sphere of the ruin. The mountain, always patient, continues its vigil. Its presence is both comforting and terrifying. You can feel it in the shifting snow, in the pattern of clouds, in the subtle echo of footsteps along empty paths. It is waiting, always, for the next act, the next sound, the next word. You sense that even now it is recalibrating, adjusting, preparing for a time when it may call more insistently. The Dragonborn's final reflection, if such a thing is possible, is one of quiet dread. You understand that your life has been irrevocably altered. The ruin, the mountain, the ancient intelligences you glimpsed, they have not departed. They have entered the fabric of your existence, woven into memory, perception, and action. Even as you eat, sleep, or speak, they remain subtle, patient, pervasive. The lingering terror is not in screams, shadows, or immediate danger. It is in permanence. The Dragonborn carries the ruin within, and the ruin waits. It waits for action, for sound, for thought. It waits in the wind, in the snow, in the silent corners of rooms. Even when the world appears calm, even when companions smile or villages prosper, the ruin listens. The final line hangs as both warning and fact. They are still watching. Even in the dark, they are waiting. It is a statement of presence, inevitability, and continued consequence. The story does not resolve. It merely settles into a quiet, suffocating expectation. The Dragonborn has survived, But survival is no longer freedom. It is a ledger entry in an intelligence older than time, one that remembers everything and forgives nothing. The air is still. The snow falls lightly over the ruins. The village sleeps. But somewhere in the mountain, a pulse begins again, waiting for the next voice to answer. And you, the Dragonborn, will hear it always.